Continue our conversations here at the Mackinac Policy Conference. Now a chance to sit down with Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow. Senator Stabenow, always good to see you.
It's great. It's been a great few days here.
It has.
Yeah.
It's been fascinating. I want to start, though, with what happened yesterday back in Washington and Robert Mueller's, you heard, and Robert Mueller's statement. Did it change the way you see any of this, and how do you think we should proceed?
Well, it didn't change anything. Having reading the report, there's really two pieces, both very important. And the second piece is that the president did try to obstruct justice. And I think that Bob Mueller was saying, okay, Congress, you have to do hearings, you have to take it from here, which I think is important in what the House is doing. The second part of that, which is actually the first chapter, is about Russian interference. And Devin, there's really no question about that. And in Congress, we need to act because Russia is now starting to get involved in the 2020 election. They also, it's not just the United States, they got involved with Brexit. They're getting involved in every democracy to create disruption. Now, in our country, they actually went a step further because they had a relationship with one of the candidates. And so it went farther. But the truth is, they're doing this around the world. It's dangerous for us because we've not taken action. They are continuing. We have bipartisan bills that Mitch McConnell needs to take up in the United States Senate on sanctions, addressing other issues on Russia, because the largest number of people that were indicted by Bob Mueller were Russians. 3 Russian companies and over 20 Russians who did engage. And that's being missed in all of this and is the most serious issue as it relates to our country.
This, of course, is a House matter to start, but do you think impeachment proceedings should begin?
I think they need to proceed with investigative hearings, and whether they call that impeachment or they just proceed to investigate, they have to now take what Bob Mueller did, bring in witnesses and lay it out. This is really beyond all of us. It's about whether or not any president's above the law, and they're not.
Some Democrats who are paid to think about such things are thinking a lot about what this means strategically, whether it helps the president, if he actually is courting impeachment or something. I mean, do you think at all about the political ramifications of it, or can you try and stay
Well, one of the things that I'm concerned about is that folks are thinking in political terms rather than what is best for our country in the long run in terms of a democracy. You know, when our country was founded and they put together the Constitution, they were coming from basically a dictatorship. And they knew sooner or later somebody would try to be above the law. And so they put in all these checks and balances, and Congress is the most important check and balance. And so I believe for our kids and our grandkids, we have a responsibility to do what is right for the country, wherever that leads. And so I think steps need to be taken. They need to lay out the case, take what Bob Mueller did. He basically said, I took it as far as I could, 10 different areas of obstruction, and now Congress needs to take the next step in investigation.
Let's move on to some other topics. I don't imagine back when you were running for Senate you thought I'm going to be obsessed with fish one day. But you were spending a lot of time now trying to figure out this Asian carp problem. How big of a problem is it? And is this almost $750 million plan, do you think, going to be enough?
This is an important plan. We finally have the plan. When we started, my whole effort was to get the Army Corps of Engineers' attention to understand this is important. These fish have been coming up the Mississippi River and now the Illinois River for years, and no one thought it was a big deal. So we made it a big deal, and in a bipartisan basis. I actually had to introduce a bill with Senator Rob Portman to say, you have to do a study, you have to give us recommendations. It's taken us a long time to get them here, but they're now at a point where what's called the Chiefs Report is done, the specifics have been put in place, a cost estimate has been put in place, just like the SULACs. It was the same process we had to go through. Now we can take it and not only get the appropriations to get these things going, but our congressional delegations also going on July 1 to the locks, meet with the Army Corps and with people in Illinois to say this is serious, and we got to get it going.
Do you have a sense of just what it would mean, what would happen if they actually were to get in large numbers into Lake Michigan?
Well, first of all, I mean, we have a $7 billion fishing industry, $16 billion boating industry. These are up to 100-pound fish with no functioning stomach. They basically go into the waters and eat what I say is all the fish food. So the other fish die because they eat all the plankton and so on. They also respond to sound, which means they jump out of the water, they get into boats, they've been known to break somebody's nose on a jet ski. In fact, interestingly, the scientists have developed a way through sound as part of the effort to keep them out of the water by booms under the water. But these are very serious invasive species.
Yeah. We'll stay with kind of water issues then. You and Senator Peters are spending an awful lot of time on this PFAS problem. And Michigan, in an odd enough way, we're kind of looked at now as a leader in digging into this, but it's not because we necessarily, it doesn't sound like to me, we know necessarily what we're doing yet. We're just taking it more seriously than other people are so far. But how big of a problem is this, and what do we need to do?
Well, unfortunately, in identified areas, we have more than any other state, which is why
Which may be, we're better at looking for the problem,
it could
right?
be.
Yeah.
Closed military bases as well as Selfridge have identified areas, but also it's because these chemicals are used in manufacturing. So on the west side of the state, it's been manufacturing processes, tanning centers, and so on. So we're looking at a number of things. I got money in the budget last year for a health study. We need to know the full ramifications if somebody has been drinking water and has been exposed. We don't know that for sure yet. We also need to set the right level on, and this is very important, there's House and Senate bills to really make this a toxic substance so that we can do Superfund type cleanups.
Yeah.
We've put money in the budget on cleanup, but just barely beginning to do that. There's a PFAS Accountability Act that I introduced, bipartisan bill that Senator Peters got into the defense authorization last week that sets up the way Department of Defense will work with state governments, local governments.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've introduced that I think is very important is a bill that would make it clear that any military personnel, any veteran that's been exposed would be covered for health consequences by the VA. You know, one of the first things I did going in as a state rep years ago was work on Agent Orange because the VA didn't cover Agent Orange exposure. And it took until the early 90s to get that to happen. So I'm looking at that also. We need to get that in place because the most common way people have been exposed is by working with these chemicals on a military base.
Gary told me yesterday it's even in my dental floss, which I
mean, you don't
it's
want
just
to know.
it's everywhere.
That static guard.
Yeah. Anything that keeps something from sticking to something else.
Right.
Yeah. Lastly, about trade. It's interesting. This president is taking up a lot of causes that your caucus has wanted forever, to get serious with China about trade, to level the playing field.
Right.
And yet we see a lot of these tariffs really hurting a lot of Michigan industry and farmers.
Well, this is complicated, and I feel like the White House has no strategy. They just throw everything up against the wall to see what sticks. And agriculture is getting caught in the middle of this, as well as a lot of our manufacturers. What I wish the president would do is do what he said he would do on day one, which is called China a currency manipulator. He hasn't done that. Neither did President Obama. So it's a bipartisan omission. But he said on day one he would do that, and they came out this week and said no, they're not going to do that. So instead, they do this broad attack on China that is causing our farmers to lose markets. And I have great concerns. I think we do need to be tough on China, but I think it needs to be strategic. And there needs to be a plan, and I don't see a plan right now, which is of great concern to me. What's also of concern is in the meantime, they've put together, I believe in a haphazard way, support or subsidies for farmers that have had mixed results. Our cherry growers, our other fruit growers that have been impacted have not gotten help. Others have gotten a lot of help. In the first round, they actually gave money to processors that are foreign owned. JBS, who's in Brazil, got American taxpayer money and also are taking our markets. And so, what I'm concerned about, there's not a thoughtful approach that is strategic. And Michigan farmers, Michigan manufacturers are getting caught up in the middle of this.
Sarah Stabenow, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you.